What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation Podcast. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle. We got a whole Aggie roundtable of goodness today. First, it's Alex Miller of the Eagle as well. Alex, how's it going?
Going well.
And then we got the Godfather, one of the Godfathers of the My Aggie Nation Podcast, back with us, Zach Taylor. Zach, how's it going?
It's hanging, man.
Good. And then our special guest, the guy who is traveling all across God's green earth right now with all of his jobs. That's Andrew Monaco, the voice of the Aggies. How's Tampa treating you, Andrew?
Tampa is treating me well. It's warm, which has been a nice change from the last.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous.
I've got a flannel, a vest, and I've got my heavy jacket that I wore to work, and I was still cold. So,
well, both Andrew and I were kind of freezing our buns off at the last day of the Frisco Classic a couple days ago. So it's probably a welcome change of pace scenery for you, Andrew.
The toes have finally thawed out from Sunday.
Well, let's go ahead and get started there, Andrew, with a little Aggie baseball. We'll save the goodness of Aggie men's basketball for last. But baseball, a little bit of an interesting start, a little bit of a slow start maybe to the Jim Schlossnagle era. What's kind of been your initial take on Aggie baseball and where they've gotten so far?
I think the absolute positive is the starting pitching by Texas A&M, and the way Jim Schlossnagle talked about it. It's you set up your pitching staff, not just for this year, but in the future. So you have someone like Nathan Detmer on a Friday, has some experience of pitching in the SEC last year. Micah Dallas, although he hasn't pitched in the SEC, has skins on the wall from pitching at Tech. And then as Jim Schlossnagle says, your Sunday starter, usually a freshman for this year and for years in the future, in Ryan Prager, and then Christian Curtis being your Tuesday starter. So with an eye on this year and an eye for the future, except for Friday's start by Nathan Detmer, which was a bit of an anomaly, the starting pitching has been good. You notice I haven't brought up the relief pitching. That's where you've got to find out who is going to be in what role, I think earlier. Great job by Polish and Cortez on Saturday in the win in the Frisco Classic, but still some things to figure out. And hitting has been hit and miss. They're leaving a lot of runners on base. Good news, getting on. Bad news, not driving everyone in. They left runners in scoring position. Instead of having that loss on Sunday to Wichita State, you drive in some of those earlier runs. Does that help the bullpen down the line? You don't know, but I think there's still some adjustment about who is going to pitch when and who's going to be in that comfort zone. Do you start a clean inning? Are you comfortable coming in with runners on? Things like that. The lineup seems to be coming. It really does. We've noticed that lineup. And it's had to be juggled, has it not, with Trevor Werner in and out of that lineup. And we've seen Cole Kaler in Frisco. He played second, third, and short during that Classic. So things that are still coming together, but has to be kind of quick with that SEC season right around the corner.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Andrew on that one, too. I mean, especially Micah Dallas, because, again, a transfer, he's coming in. He's now finally got a shot to be in that starting rotation on the weekend. He's been tremendous so far. But yeah, when you look at the back of the pen, you knew that Moo Menifee was going to be a guy that they were going to lean heavily on this year. I think they're still going to lean heavily on him, but he is not, as far as looking at the numbers, as far as what he's done, it hasn't been a great start for him. So he's a guy that really needs to get it together if they want to be able to sew up that the back of the bullpen and be able to accomplish what they need to. And yeah, early on too, and Andrew was talking about how the lineup is coming. I think that's true. And early on in the season, especially in colder weather, you kind of have to take things with a grain of salt, right? Especially when it comes to hitting. You don't know if those guys are warmed up yet, figuratively and literally. So, and you also got a lot of new players that are trying to gel right now. And I get it's a little bit different than maybe it would be in basketball and football, but you have a nucleus of guys that a lot of them have not played together before, and they're still trying to figure each other out. So everyone knew that there were going to be some growing pains. Everybody knew it was going to be a bit of a learning curve under a new head coach. There's obviously been some good things. There's been some bad things, but shoring up that bullpen, I think, has to be the number one priority right now.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the guys left on base. I think in the first 8 games for the Frisco Classic, that was 75 batters left on base. The interesting thing I'll see, and I agree with you, starting pitching has been pretty fantastic. Micah Dallas has been lights out. And talking with Micah, 3-pitch guy, and that slider is something he's really trying to work on, incorporate more. So kind of really a 2-pitch guy moving forward through these first couple of games. It's done well for him so far. He's going to need to build up that slider once they start getting into SEC play. So that'll be an interesting thing. Andrew, I know your great work is having conversations with these guys, getting to know them beyond the diamond. Who are some of these players that have stood out to you that you've gotten to talk to, or even some of the coaches, coaching staff that have really piqued your interest in some of the personalities surrounding the program?
As you know, we started the baseball show, the Aggie Baseball Hour this year. Jim Schlossnagel did something like this at TCU, and he wanted to add it here. And I think it's fascinating to be able to do it. And to have, for me personally, Jimbo, then Buzz, and now Coach Schloss all year to talk to them, it is a lot of fun. Still learning. I always talk about words. I'll use the buzz words we use. Still learning that with Coach Schlossnagel about certain things. And the more I get to talk with him, the more I learn about his dynamics, how he wants that first batter to get on. It's one thing to get a 2-out hit. That's really good, but your chances are limited to get him in. Can you get that first batter on? And then can you move him up via a stolen base and then have someone drive him in? Things like that. Micah Dallas was one of those guys, as you talked about, Travis, and I find that he's willingly accepts that role as, okay, I'm the guy who has a lot of the experience. And normally you don't see a lot of strikeouts from him because, he's a ground ball pitcher, but the strikeouts are great, which tells me that slider is moving. And we had Logan Britt on for the first show that we did, and I like the move to center field. I think this is a guy, and we saw a little bit in Frisco, use all fields. I think last year he was more of a pull guy, but when he used all fields, and I'm thinking of the game in Houston, and I'm doing that broadcast with John Sheshik, and he just loved the all-around ability of Logan Britt. And then he threw someone out at the plate, and once he does that, then guys stop running on him. And that was as a right fielder. Now as a center fielder, he can chew up an awful lot of ground. He and Brett Minnick are tall, and I'm fascinated by the multi-sport stars, right? Logan, the football and the baseball, Minnick, the basketball, and Minnick, if I'm not mistaken, on Saturday had one where he had to post up that foul ground, the wall there, to make a catch. And then Dylan Rock, can he make that adjustment from UTSA? And he was thrilled because Dylan Rock was a man without a team. When he knew he was going to transfer from UTSA, having grown up around A&M, come to football games, he really wanted to come to A&M and transfer here. But there was no coach at that time. What he told us, the story on Studio 12, was he wanted to come, no coach. Once Nolan Cain got here, Nolan Cain told Schloss, hey, UTSA played at LSU. We couldn't get this guy out. And that kind of opened the eyes as well for him to come here. What does Kalai Harrison do in year number 2? Obviously, he's going to play every inning there at shortstop. How is he going to hit? Is that going to be the next level? I love watching Jack Moss bat, by the way. I think he is as good a bat. John Thornton in basketball talked about the poise of Boots Radford late in a shot clock or an inbound. I think there's a poise to Jack Moss at the plate. You want to try to sneak a first pitch fastball, base hit. He can go to all fields, but he doesn't panic with 2 strikes. I think he's sometimes even more difficult to get when you get the two strikes on him. So those are the things. Cole Kaler, obviously, we've seen. I think Troy Claunch becomes as important a person on this team, not just in the lineup, but his experience and how he is going to affect that pitching staff, that quarterback on the field, to mix metaphors and sports. And I think it's going to be a lasting impact for the pitchers and also the lasting impact for the catchers on this squad, what they will learn from him.
Yeah, Dylan Rock, a guy who has pretty much every time he's gotten on base, he's trying to swipe a bag and has done pretty good jobs on that. Alex, our local food reporter, I think has a question. Alex.
Yeah, Andrew, did you get any good food up in Frisco? And you got your eye out on any spots over in Tampa this week?
In Tampa, first and foremost, I will be looking for a Cuban sandwich. So I'm on that look right after this. I'm on my look. I had a great one at the Orange Bowl from Miami. So looking for that, especially in this area. Frisco, no, because it was up and back for me. So I went up on Friday, came back, did basketball Saturday, up and back again. So I did not get to take advantage. And Alex, as you know, Thomas Dick is a foodie as well, SID for baseball. He had, I think it was Tommy's Tamales was up there, and there was one other place wanted to go to. But yeah, you try to check out something local if possible, but I couldn't do it in Frisco. I'm on the search here in Tampa.
I can confirm that the pretzel at Ryder's Park was slightly above average.
Was it?
Yeah, it was slightly above. It was a little cold,
Yeah,
slightly
yeah.
above average. It is no Ben's pretzel.
No,
nothing compares to Ben's pretzel.
No, you knew the bar was low when Thomas said that the pretzels are at that ballpark in the past were subpar and really subpar. So for you to get above average, something really happened. Maybe it was just the heat lamp. Who knows?
Slightly above. Yeah. So let's go ahead
some
and
more
shift
salt to
gears.
the ingredients or something.
Well, I went saltless.
Saltless?
Unsalted.
You're
So
salty enough.
I am salty enough. Now, if you go, pro tip for everybody, if you go to an A&M baseball game, you get a Ben's pretzel first off. Amazing. They're delicious. But this year, added on, you can get a little bit of cinnamon sugar poured onto that, and it is fantastic.
Really? I did
Yes.
not know that.
Little cinnamon sugar dust. It'll change your life. So on that note, let's go ahead and shift over to Aggie men's basketball, who've been doing some sweet things lately. See that? I'm coming for your job, Andrew. I'm coming for your job. Andrew, what? It's a team that I know Buzz Williams called it heartbreak when they were going through that 8-game losing skid. They were able to win, I believe, was it 4 of 5 there in the final stretch, and they're going in the SEC tournament. What's that vibe like, and what have you seen from this team, especially in that last little bit that they've been able to win and have fun? They said.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's it, and it is a different vibe. It's interesting. Everybody wanted to know, could they go 500 in the conference? They did. It's the way they got to 500 is what nobody expected. I don't know if anybody expected 4-0 to start. I know we didn't expect 8 losses in a row. That's for sure. And then at the team we're playing tomorrow in Florida, that started this 5 of 6 and winning the last 4. Especially that win at 25 Alabama seemed to really, really do a lot for the confidence here. So what Buzz has told us post-game a lot of times is, you know what, I'm going to play the 5. We're going to give us max effort. And that's where this starting 5 is now. And he's going, I don't want to say positionless, but I think he's taken the labels away from players. You don't necessarily have to be a point guard to initiate the offense, but we can put the ball in Quentin Jackson's hands or Boots Radford's hands. Hey, it could be Wade Taylor or Hassan Diarra. That's fine, the point guard, but sometimes they're not going to be on that floor. And I like, they're taking their shots. They're really running a more efficient offense, if you ask me, and they're finding the mismatches. That's what I love. I think that IQ is coming through. So, and I talked about that the poise of Boots. If he's got the mismatch, they put the ball in his hands, and then he just takes that guy usually to the rack, and he can finish left hand, right hand, very good around the rim. Late shot clock, ball in his hands. Same thing with Quentin Jackson. Not a lot of panic. And when you've got a number 15 and Henry Coleman III, that's the other thing. They now have a big 3, which I think they were looking for. You talk about teams that are like, as much as the chemistry was good and what the staff did, putting this team together from recruiting and transfer portal, and they had the chemistry early, then it developed more in the SEC. What I found interesting in the 8, if they had gotten blown out in all 8 of those losses, I think it would have been really different. The frustrating part is they were a possession or 2 away in all of those games, and they talked about that thin line between winning and losing, but they kept ending up on the losing side. They have found a way now to be more efficient on offense, get their shots. Look, everything still runs off their defense. And I think that's the thing. It travels. And it travels in conference. It travels on the road. Hopefully it travels here into the SEC tournament. But they really play everything out of their defense. Now that they are scoring on offense, you can set up that defense when the other team has to take the ball out of the basket. It gives them the chance to not turn it over, to get a shot on the rim and get an offensive rebound. They're very good. It's the defensive rebounding that has gotten a lot better in these last 6 games. They are not allowing the opposition second and third cracks at the basket. They've really tightened that up for sure.
So I know the entire team as a whole has been playing better here of late, but when you look at Quentin Jackson, and again, he's a guy that was leading the team in scoring already, coming off the bench. He was getting plenty of minutes that were in the ball game. But since he's been in that starting lineup, they've been 5-1 since he got in, with the only loss coming to top-ranked Auburn. Does that make any kind of difference when you have a guy like that in the starting 5?
Yeah, I think it does. Now, I never minded him coming off the bench because I think he's a tough player to match from the other team's bench.
Right.
I don't think a lot of teams have a player like that, but I think it does give you more of those weapons. Like, who is going to? You've got to choose who's going to guard Q now and who's going to guard Boots. Your big can take Coleman, and if you don't have someone who is good enough to guard, and with the IQ of, look, Quentin Jackson, for much the early part of his career was exclusively downhill, and that led to the charges, and it would limit his minutes. But now that he's added a pull-up, now that he's added the penetration, and he can pitch to a Henry Coleman or an Andre Gordon running the baseline, something like that, more dangerous. No, I don't think it's a mistake. And see, I always thought you had your maroon team, your starter, and your white team were your next five. And this team's deeper than a lot of teams. And to me, I would always joke with Dr. Thornton, like, okay, you take maroon, I'll take white. I'm fine. I like that five. But I just think this starting five is a little more energy. If they had a problem early in the season, they got off to slow starts and then had to dig out of holes. Even though they beat Missouri, they were down 11-0 by the second time out. They were down to Arkansas on the road, only to lose in overtime. I think this allows them to get off to a much quicker start and not have to play from behind. I think Quentin Jackson has had that kind of effect.
Andrew, I know you sat down with one of your conversations with Quentin Jackson recently. What were some of the highlights of that? Because, man, when you talk about guys who are enjoyable to interview and always have something good to say, he's high on that list.
Yeah, I needed the long form to get more of what he appreciates about Buzz Williams, about how it's more than just basketball for him, and how he's changed in just the 3 years here. The other thing was, I wasn't sure at this time last year he was coming back. I don't think any of us knew what he was going to do. And I know early in the year I had asked him about unfinished business, but I think he's been an integral part. I almost feel at times that this is the foundation year for Texas A&M basketball. But I think it's important that he and Dre and Haas and even a guy like Hayden Hefner have been here throughout, that they are part of this foundation. And Q has kind of set the tone with everybody else to have another valuable player like Boots, who's been through, skins on the wall through the ACC at Virginia Tech. But for me, it was just how he's grown as a person, how he's grown as a leader. He had mentioned a couple times he needs to be a better leader for this team, how he has adopted Manny Obaseki and Wade Taylor, and that the legacy of Q is going to be through those guys, similar to what Christian Kirk did for football for Travion Williams, similar to what Bobby Brown has done for those D linemen, what I think DeMarvin Leal will do as well. To me, I just needed a longer form and to get him on record of what A&M has meant to him and really what he has meant to A&M. I think he's been a big part of this team embracing fans, being out in the community. If it's passing out breakfast tacos, if it's going to Midnight Yell, I just, the post game and sawing them off with the Reed Rowdies, things like that. I think he's been a big part. I think he's a likable person, Travis. I really do. And I'm glad that we had an extra year. And I'm happy for him because I think had he gone on to whatever he was going to do next after 2 years, I think there would have been something nagging in that it was taken away from him. Not that he didn't give his all, that it was taken away, an SEC tournament his first year. And then all of February, COVID took that away from him. And I think this is much more fulfilling for him. But as a young man, his mom then texted me and said, she listened, I am amazed how mature he is. And that's something special when you hear that from somebody's mother.
Well, this is certainly a pivotal week for the A&M men's basketball team in terms of their postseason hopes. What do you kind of make of the Aggies' resume right now? What do you really feel like they need to do there in Tampa at the SEC tournament to, maybe have a chance to back into the NCAA tournament or at least secure an NIT bid?
I think as eye-opening as the win at Alabama was, I think they must beat Florida. Both teams on the bubble. It's a fascinating matchup. And then to meet Auburn, one, they have to play better against Auburn. I think they've got to beat Auburn to put themselves in consideration. I don't know if that does it all, but for them to get into the NCAA tournament and things still look, there's things out of their control that have to happen. You can't have, one bid leagues losing and getting a second team in there. That's going to hurt them. A lot of things, but I think having to win the first two is the first step. That's what they can control. I believe there's a postseason somewhere for them right now, but I think they could really lock up more. And I think that would be a very good thing for this team. But the NCAA would really be a validation for what they've done in this back third of the SEC conference. And I'm interested to play Florida because even though that's when this run started, that wasn't a great game by A&M. They took a great lead, but again, they just kind of hung on and needed Wade's 3 free throws. But then they really got it going. So it's going to be interesting to play Florida again with, I'm almost calling this a new team. And then how will they match up against Auburn, which I think is a tough matchup with their length and what they do. I think they've got to take 2 to get consideration. Anything more than that really puts them in a good position.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just like looking back at the last month because, that it was almost a month ago they went out on the road to Auburn and lost. And just reading the quotes from Bruce Pearl yesterday, it's for certain that they're going to play the winner of A&M in Florida. And he was just saying how they're probably a win or two away from making the NCAA tournament and either are going to play with their hair on fire. So, it seems like Auburn, at least, they're not taking whoever they're going to play lightly, whether it's A&M or Florida.
And I don't think Auburn can afford to do that because, well, I mean, if you guys look at the SEC, nothing has really gone to form. There are some games you're watching going, well, how did that team beat that team? Because it's the SEC. Look, Missouri was lost by a point to Auburn. I mean, there were the scares by Auburn, and I think Bruce Pearl has to do that for this team. They are not going, no one's going to skate through this tournament. And you're right, for Florida and for Texas A&M, that is going to be a game that's going to decide who gets to move on and either be more on the bubble or that bubble's going to pop. But yeah, see, I almost think it's the same as 2 years ago when this team had won 5 of their last 7 and never got to play in the SEC tournament. And that was going to be Missouri in the first round. And if y'all remember, it was going to be Auburn again after the Aggies had won at Auburn at the end of the year and spoiled their undefeated home season. So the parallels are a little fascinating to 2 years ago, where that team seemed to gel at the end of the season as well.
I think one of the most refreshing things about covering this team is the fact that Buzz Williams, even though some of the things come across as cliches, they're not cliches. And so when he does say the SEC is a fine line, I mean, you look, the difference between what was it, 5th and 10th is like a game, maybe 2 games. I mean, it really is a fine line there in between all of it. And that's kind of case in point in that. So let's I like to play around. BartTorvik.com has a great little tool on there where you can put in games, put in wins and losses, and through their metrics, it kind of shows what the field of 64 and left out it is. By their metrics, a win over Florida and a win over Auburn puts them in the last 4 byes of the NCAA tournament. So not exact science because it is a committee that puts this through, but they probably need 2 wins according to their metrics to have a look at that NCAA tournament, just like you were saying. I want to wheel around everyone with this question once, and then I think, Alex, you got one to close us out here. But so that let's say that they beat Florida, lose to Auburn, or some combination of that, and they end up getting a high seed in the NIT. Is the NIT a step in the right direction for this program? Zach, what do you think?
Given what we saw during an 8-game losing streak, I think there would be many that would be happy about it. It's hard to gauge with everything that's gone on these last 2 years. I mean, obviously, the team was being successful before they were supposed to go to the SEC tournament in 2020. So you wonder how, or 2020. So you wonder how successful that team would have been if they had gotten into the postseason. Of course, last year, you got to take that with a grain of salt. So yes, given what happened, given the turnover that occurred in the offseason, and bringing in a lot of guys who had never played together before, and being able to end the year the way that they have, and then, of course, hopefully in the SEC tournament, I think there'd be lots of people that'd be happy with the direction of that.
Alex, it's year 3 of Buzz. A lot of people are saying it's year 3. Year 3 is when he took Virginia Tech to the NCAA tournament. Is NIT good enough for year 3 with the context of everything that's gone on?
I say yes. And Travis, we've talked about it a lot. I think you got to say that year 2 is a mulligan, given everything that happened. And, when you look at the pieces that are going to come back, when you look at how Wade Taylor's kind of emerged as a key player in this team, Henry Coleman's definitely, as Andrew said, one of the big three. He's only a sophomore. He's coming back. Boots Radford, he's going to come back. The pieces are there and the growth has occurred. They're going to certainly miss Quentin Jackson moving forward. But yes, I mean, they haven't been to the postseason in like 4 years. I mean, if you would have told A&M fans at the beginning of the season that, hey, A&M's going to be having a shot at the SEC tournament to play in the NCAA tournament, but they're going to play in the NIT, I think they probably would have taken it. And it certainly didn't go the way that most people probably would have expected it. But yes, I certainly think this is a step in the right direction, and especially when you consider the pieces that will be coming back next season.
Yeah, and Alex, and to your point, a postseason not only would be good for the guy that we mentioned, and I'll throw this to you, Andrew, too, Quentin Jackson, who probably might have played his way into a D-League contract with this last couple of games. A couple more games under his belt there could be good for him. Kind of same question and those thoughts to you, Andrew.
Yeah, let me start with Quentin Jackson. It goes back to what Jimbo Fisher says, put it on film, right? Now it's more film for someone to watch. And I think what helps Q is he's always been a willing defender, which I think helps if he wants to go somewhere next level in professional basketball. You'd start at the beginning of the season. Would you have taken 20 wins? Yes. Would you have taken 9-9 in the conference? Yes. To Alex's point, long and winding road to get there. But that's what you get. I think it's a step forward. And I think the way they're playing at the end of this season makes it a little more memorable. And not just for these players, but I think there's some excitement. If you are a recruit, do you want to be a part of this? If you are a transfer, do you want to be a part of this? I think that's also the yes. And if you're, how players recruit players, you're going to talk to a Henry Coleman III, who is happy to be here. So is Boots Radford with his family, glad that he's been here. You can play with a dynamic point guard like Wade Taylor IV. I just think, look, there's a lot of times you can play college basketball. Can you play for Buzz Williams? I think they're two different things. That doesn't mean you can't play. Can you buy in? And that's what this team has done from the get-go. And you know what you have to do. You know who you have to be. You know that you've got to be an OKG, our kind of guy. I just think it's the excitement, and I think you build from it. And I think it's important that they make the NIT. But then, you know what? You don't settle in the future. Then you build from there. But I think it's a great next step for this team.
Definitely.
Well, let's close with this because we'd be remiss to not talk a little A&M football with spring practice starting. What's maybe one thing as spring practice starts that you kind of got your eye on as the Aggies get going here? Travis, we can start with you.
Oh, cool. I'll jump right in. Well, I'll take the easy one then since I'm going first. Quarterback battle. Everyone loves a good quarterback battle. And that is you got Haynes King, you got Connor Wigman, you've got Max Johnson. I think Haynes King is the heir apparent with what he was able to do starting last season. And then if I'm going to put my money down, I think Connor Wigman might be the number 2 guy in there with how much Jimbo Fisher raved. You do have some experience in Max Johnson, and he could certainly slide in there and be the experienced one. But like that Haynes King, Connor Wigman thing just really intrigues me, and I'm excited to see that.
Andrew, we can go with you next.
Defensive line and how they're going to be able to rotate. I think they've been deeper than they've ever been. And I think that D line, my partner, Dave Elmendorf, despite being on the back end and being the safety, he knows that front 4 helps that back 7. And I like the depth that they have. I think they're losing a lot of talented people, but they were able to rotate in a lot of young people. And I think what Elijah Robinson and Terry Price have done for that D line, I'm excited to see that. And I think that back end as well. I think the competition. I think the other thing that we all have to understand, there's not going to be anything decided in the spring on offense or defense. It's going to give us an idea. There's going to be some times where we're going to see guys playing in positions that we won't see in the fall. Jimbo kind of gets a look. This one as well. I was so impressed by what Bryce Foster and Ruben Fothery did on that offensive line, as well as a Layden Robinson, as well as an Aki Agumbi. Interested in that offensive line, that who's going to be where. I don't know if Ruben Fothery got nearly enough credit. I have to chuckle because everything I saw leading up to the postseason and the playoff, they all raved about Will Anderson. Do you guys remember Will Anderson's name when the Aggies played Alabama? I don't remember him being in a ton of plays. That was a true freshman who did a very nice job against him. And I think those are great building blocks for that offensive line in the future.
I'm interested to see what's going to emerge out of this tight end competition. You have a ton of talent, young talent, kind of unproven talent in some ways. And, Baylor Cupp is the elder statesman there, but who's going to pick up the reins that Jalen Wademeyer left? Who's going to take over that position? Because a lot is made about the wide receiver position. And of course, that's a big question mark coming in, but really the fail safe. And I think a key part of any Jimbo Fisher offense is going to be at tight end. Who is going to fill those shoes? And that's going to be fun to watch this spring. And then of course, going into the fall.
Well, speaking of back ends, Zach Taylor is always bringing up our back end. So thanks for that, buddy.
I don't even know what that means.
Anyway, that's all the time.
About that.
That's all the time. I just had to get one Zach Taylor shot into this podcast.
A little zinger in there. Okay,
I haven't
appreciate
filled
it.
my quota yet, so
It's been a while.
Anyway, so that's all the time we have for the show. Big thank you to Andrew, one of the best in the business for what he does. Always great to have him on the show. So thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time. Go find your Cuban sandwich.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Always. So for Alex Miller, Zach Taylor, I'm Travis Brown. This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We'll see you next week.